In our modern age, we tend to congratulate ourselves on all the stuff we know. And in terms of information, yes, far more is available to us than at any time in history. Pick up your phone, you practically have the world at your fingertips. We never had that before. But in truth, modernization has led to the need for specialists. People who do mostly one thing, whether it be a field of medicine, landscaping, car repair, plumbing, farming, pharmacy, construction, whatever. The modern human society is a society of specialists. And in the past, people were generalists. They knew many things about many things. They knew how to farm. They knew how to hunt or to fish. They knew what you could eat in the forest and what would kill you. They could look at the sky and tell you what the weather was going to be like. You could drop them in the woods and they'd be just fine. Without our gizmos, without our technology, they would find us rather dense. But there was always one area from the beginning of existence where specialists seemed to thrive, and that was in matters of faith. Remember the story of King Saul before he was king? He was walking along and he encountered this group of rather charismatic prophets, and he fell into this kind of ecstatic trance, and people were amazed because regular people didn't usually experience God that way. But a voice starts to emerge in the Old Testament. It comes from the prophets. It's this idea that all would know God. Like Matt said last week, that God would etch God's law on our hearts. Or as Joel says it today, then afterward I will pour out my Spirit on all flesh. Your sons and daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams. Your young men will see visions. In other words, a day is coming when the Spirit will be available to all. And as Christians, we think that comes with Jesus. A lot of my colleagues, I think, long for older days. You know, there was a certain respect and prestige that just got handed to you when you were a pastor way back when, because you were a pastor. But that also meant people held you at arm's length, because as a spiritual specialist, as a person who was so involved in the holy, folks thought you couldn't really understand basic human life. I'd much rather, like everyone else in this time, earn my respect and not be treated that way. But the problem, of course, with the Spirit being available radically to all, is that people can claim to be speaking for God when they're really speaking for themselves, or out of pain, or out of fear, or anger, or out of a twisted understanding of God. Now, this happens with specialists too. The prophets, after all, were calling out Israel, but they were also calling out their shepherds, their specialists, the temple priests. The prophets came forth reminding Israel that God had brought them out of Egypt, that God had made them prosperous, that God had protected them. But while the priests and the prophets who worked with the priests kept saying, everything's great, just keep doing your temple stuff, keep sacrificing, all is well with God, the people, in their haste to grab the things of this world, the people, in their haste to try to pad their odds, so to speak, by experimenting with and outright worshiping the gods of their neighbors, in the willingness of the people to succumb to their own greed, Israel had created something it never had had before: a class system. And the poor, they had become Egypt. Oh, before this, your neighbor might be richer than you, but you had enough. And what was a few sheep? Israel had become power hungry, selfish, self-serving, and they literally had family members begging for bread on their streets. They'd become the place God had brought them out of. And the voice of God through the prophets called them out. I bring all this up because we are a people that believes the Spirit is available to all, and that almost anyone could speak for God, that a specialist doesn't have a monopoly on God. But like the priests of ancient Israel thought God was saying something very different than what the prophets were saying, it's very easy in the business of speaking for God or listening to God to get fooled or to fool yourself. And this is true because sometimes that spirit that feels so much like God's call is really our spirit or our desire or our pain or sin getting in the way. So, to help us find our way, I have gone back in time and gotten out of the dusty files a spiritual term first coined by General Sherman T. Potter from MASH. And that term is horse hockey. And using this term, I have developed what I would like to call today the spiritual horse hockey meter. Now, you can use it to measure how you think God is leading you. You can use it to measure what you hear Christian leaders say. You can even use it on me. It works in a very simple way. When you feel like saying something about God, or when you hear someone say something about God, look at this meter and you will have, I think, a pretty legitimate chance at finding out if it is from God or if it indeed might be horse hockey. Let's begin. Does the statement affirm the worth of all, affirm that all are God's children, or does it dehumanize and categorize a people or certain people? Affirming the worth of all is a God statement. Dehumanization, you're getting into the land of the double H. Now, this doesn't mean you can't call out evil. Joel is calling out evil in the lesson today, but he's doing it while continually reminding the children of Israel how much God loves them. Next, does the statement proclaim love above all, or does it make love conditional? Love above all is a God statement. Conditional love, i.e. God will love you if you ... Well, that's not love. It's not. When a guy is getting nails driven through his hands and he's saying, Father, forgive them, that's God stuff. That's real, unconditional, non-judging love. Does the statement seek justice for all, or only for those who fit the right category? When only those like us are worthy of fair treatment, we go towards those double H's. Does the statement seek to be merciful, or does it seek its own interest? Greed is never of God. Power in terms of God is only revealed in weakness. Jesus said, "Blessed are the merciful, because the merciful see people the way God sees people." Is the statement beautiful? Is it beautiful? Now, yes, not every single statement about God or of God is going to be beautiful, but it disturbs me how many Christian leaders there are out there who never say anything remotely beautiful. If a person cannot speak of life, of God, of humanity, of creation, of faith with beauty, that is not a person you should be listening to. Okay, good. Nobody's getting up to leave. Does the statement recognize the legitimacy of creatures we share this creation with, or does it treat the earth like a resource we can just suck dry? Only statements that recognize the wonder of God's creation and the precious nature of creation can be of the Creator. And finally, does the statement point to a time when all will be one, when we will gather at one table, when food will be shared, divisions will be healed, tears will be dried from all faces, and the truth will be recognized that all are brothers and sisters? Or does it say peace will only come when everyone is finally just like us? To quote Isaiah, "It shall come to pass in the later days that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established as the highest of the mountains, and shall be raised above the hills, and all nations shall flow to it." This is the same passage, by the way, where swords get beaten into plowshares. I hope this little meter is helpful, because I think it's important. It's important when experts in the spiritual, often self-proclaimed, are all over our internet. It's important when our kids in high school and junior high come home having heard their friends say things about God and start to wonder, is God just this angry kind of people-hating judge? It's important when we might feel personally angry or offended or wronged and confuse the fire of our own spirit with the Spirit of God. It's important to remind ourselves and others that speaking for God is always heady business. And when we dare to do it, we better err on the side of grace, because that's the only way you can be sure you are in God's neighborhood. Remember, God's Spirit is in your heart. Remember, it's also in your ears and your head. Remember whom your God is when you hear something said about God or when you speak of God. And hopefully we'll all watch our step as we journey through this pasture together. This pasture we call life.